Hi guys, Miss Ryan here. I'm really sad that I can't do a live video with you guys today, but I'm really excited to teach this step lesson. Discipline for Young Children is my favorite step lesson of all of them, and I really didn't want to miss it. So I'm doing this pre-recorded video, and then when I come back to my computer today, I will be answering any questions that you have or replying to any comments that you have. So feel free to still post questions and comments below, and I promise I will get back to them. The reason that I love this lesson is because we are constantly disciplining our kids, and discipline is very, very different than punishment. Sometimes people use them interchangeably, but they're not the same thing at all. Discipline is teaching your child something, teaching them to be a strong, capable adult, teaching them to cooperate with others, and to learn that there are different ways to do things. Whereas punishment is, from my background, I call it punitive, that you do something wrong and you get a consequence that's not related to the action that you did. So when we punish rather than discipline, our kids aren't really learning from it. And you can say, oh, well, my child did this, and so I smacked their hand and they learned not to do it again. They didn't. They didn't learn the reasons behind doing those things and why they shouldn't do them. So we really want to give our kids as many natural consequences as possible, because that's not always possible. Natural consequences can be deadly in some cases or completely inappropriate in other cases. But we do want to give them as many natural consequences as possible, and we'll talk about that during this. Punishments are things like threats, yelling, put downs. I'm a great mom, and I yell sometimes. I mean, that just happens. I'm not excusing it, but we're not all perfect. But know that if you yell, you can always try to bring it back to a good place and try to fix that. Taking things away. There are times that removing an item is appropriate, but if your child, let's say, hits their sister and then you take away their tablet, those two things aren't related. So that is not an appropriate form of discipline. That's a punishment. Spanking and hitting are also punishments, and we've seen time and time again through many studies that they are not a effective form of discipline. And so this is not what we want to be teaching our kids. We really want to show them how to learn from things and how to deal with consequences and discipline in the real world. In the real world, my supervisor is not going to come up and smack my hand when I do something wrong. She's not going to say, oh, that video about discipline was not very good, and then take away my really cool paint set that I have. So when we discipline our kids, we need to be forward thinking and say, okay, well, what are they going to be learning in the real world, and how are we going to get them to be functioning adults? And so our step book on page 94, if you're following along, has how can I discipline my child, and they have discipline spelled out, and then there's a line for each of them, and it's all different ways that we can discipline. So keep in mind that these aren't punishments, they are helping our child. So these are things that you're already probably doing with your kids, and I'm just going to facilitate on why you should be doing them more and what they're learning from it. So distract the child is our first one. And distraction is so great. When your kids are at home and fighting over the same toy, what's the first thing most parents do? Say, oh, here's another Barbie, play with this, or oh, look at this over here, what can we play with over here? We do this constantly. When our kids are like bugging us and poking at us and trying to get our attention, we say, oh, will you help me color on this paper while mommy finishes up this work that she's doing, or while I'm done with this call? So distracting, the younger the child is, the more distraction works. That's how we get our toddlers to move on to other things. But it can work with any age group. Ignore misbehavior. I always say this is a very difficult one. We don't want to ignore when our children are doing things wrong, but also our kids do a lot of things for attention. So sometimes we do have to ignore the misbehavior. I always give the example of when my daughter was 2. We were sitting on the ground in her playroom and we were playing, and she took a drink of water, and we're like this far apart because we're playing and we're like face to face, and she spit the water in my face. And that is like the worst thing you could ever do to me, is spit in my face. Like, it is so gross and it's so disrespectful. And I'm pretty even-tempered, and so I don't have a lot of ups and downs, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's not appropriate. You do not spit in your mommy's face. And my husband was on the phone with his mother at the time, and I was like, you better get off the phone. Your daughter spit in my face. No, I'm not dealing with this right now. I was so angry. And because I'm normally even-tempered, my 2-year-old understood that she could get a huge reaction out of me. So what did she keep doing? She kept spitting water, and my husband and I would sit her down and be like, this is not appropriate. Like, we don't spit in mommy's face. That's not nice. So every time she spit in my face, she got not only attention from me, but also from her dad, and got this one-on-one personalized attention. So she was loving it and wasn't really seeing why it's not nice to spit in people's face. So it happened over the weekend, and then my husband went back to work on Monday, and I was home with our daughter, and so I decided just to ignore it. And it's hard because it's just like the worst thing she could possibly do to me, because I just think it's the grossest thing ever. But I started ignoring it, and it wasn't like, I didn't say things like, I'm ignoring you now. That wasn't nice. Like, I just made myself busy. I went to my room and started folding some laundry, and she followed after me. And then I went and took that laundry and brought it into another room and put it away. And so she quit doing it because she wasn't getting the attention for it. And then that night, her dad came home, and she did it again to me, and he sat her down, and he's like, honey, you can't do this. That's not nice. Remember, we talked about this. I was like, And so she did it again, of course, because now she's getting attention for it. And so we talked about it, and we had to decide that we were just going to completely ignore it. And so she tried it like 1 or 2 more times, and then she hasn't done it since. So it's hard to ignore misbehavior sometimes, and there's definitely times that you can't ignore misbehavior. If your child is going to hurt someone or hurt themselves, we definitely can't ignore that. But if it's something small, or if it's something repetitive that isn't putting anyone in danger, then that's absolutely something we can ignore and try to give positive attention in other ways. Structure the environment is another great thing that you are probably already doing. In some ways that we structure the environment is baby-proofing our house. If you don't want your child to get into the pots and pans, especially the glass pans in your bottom cabinet, you put a baby lock on it. You put your chemicals behind a baby lock. You put your medicine up in a high counter with a baby lock. Things like that. You're structuring the environment for what you want for your kids. That includes things like, if you want your toys in a certain place, then in your house, then you have to keep your toys in a certain place in the house. If you don't want food all over the house, then you have to make the rule that we only eat food at the dinner table. So those are things that you're structuring so the kids know the rules and then they can follow them. And again, this is not a punishment. This is a teaching tool. And so you're teaching your children what appropriate behavior is. And that's going to be different for every family. I'm pretty liberal that my kids can eat anywhere in the house, but in bedrooms and in bathrooms, because that's gross. But my best friend, her kids can only eat at the table. And both are fine, but that is the rules in our house, and then we both have to stick to that. That also means keeping things that are yours just for you and putting boundaries and rules on those things too. That toddlers, everything is theirs, but also everything that is yours is theirs, but you have to make lines in the sand. Routines fall into structuring the environment. Routines are great for kids. If it's too strict, that can lead to problems sometimes. Like, your newborn shouldn't only eat at 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m. They should eat when they're hungry. But having the routine of eat, play, nap is great. That they eat, and then they play for a little bit, and when they're tired, they nap. Same thing with our toddlers and our preschoolers, that when we structure the environment, that when they get up in the morning, they know that it's time to eat their breakfast and then they can play, or however it works best in your family. But knowing the routine helps keep their behavior on point. Control the situation and not the child is next. The reality is that you cannot control another person. Sometimes you feel like you can, sometimes you feel like you're in control, and then your child will do something and you realize that no, you really don't. So how we control the situation and not the child is, I always give the example of going to the grocery store, because I feel like grocery stores are kryptonite for little kids. They are usually hungry when they go. There's a lot of things on the shelves that they want that you're not going to buy them. It's boring otherwise, so unless they're doing something, it gets really boring. They don't want to go grocery shopping for an hour. They're 3 or even 8. Let's be honest. Like, grocery shopping isn't fun for me. It's definitely not fun for a little kid. And then when you're pushing the cart through and you're saying, no, you can't have Oreos, or no, you can't have that toy that's purposely hanging off the rack or whatever, that makes it even harder for them. So control the situation. Something I do when I have to go to the grocery store is I let my kids pick out a snack that they can eat while we're shopping. And they think it's really cool to get like the fries free fruit. And then I say, you have to be sitting in the cart in order to eat your snack. You can't walk around with it, so you have to sit in the cart. So they sit in the cart, they eat their snack, and that's my boundary that I put on. It keeps them entertained. They're not grumpy for not having food. It's special to them because they get to do something that not everyone gets to do in the store. And then it lets me be able to shop. And you can put boundaries on that however that works for you. Is if they can bring a little toy in the store and play with that. If you don't bring them to the store and you online shop, that helps too. But give the child a situation that works for both of you, because that's going to be easier on everyone. So you set limits. Like, my limit for this situation is my child gets a snack, but they have to eat it in the cart. There's no wiggle room on that. Give choices. Is it the free fruit that's in the little cart at Fry's? Is it a bag of goldfish as we're going through? However that looks, that they can choose fruit or goldfish. They can have pretzels or veggie sticks. However that looks, you give them some choices so they have a say in it as well. Involve the child in not only their choices, but also in their discipline. And depending on how old your child is, they can be more involved the older they are. But this is where you connect natural and logical consequences to things. So I give the example a lot in class that if your 3-year-old takes their glass of milk and dumps it on the floor purposely and looks at you, what is the natural consequence? What is the logical consequence of that? They clean up the milk. If you just say, that was wrong, and you send them to their room, they're not really learning anything. Because what happens in real life? If I spill or if I dump something out, I'm the one who has to clean it up as an adult. No one else is going to come through for me. I'm not a Kardashian. I don't have the money to have maids or anything else. I have to be the one to clean it up. And our kids are going to have to do that too. So they need to learn young that if you spill something, you clean it up. That is a natural and a logical consequence for an action. And some situations don't have natural consequences, or some natural consequences are inappropriate. That's when you have to use logical ones. You would never want to say, oh, the natural consequence for running out into the road is that you get hit by a car. That's awful. That's not appropriate at all. And let's be honest, that little kids don't understand that a car would seriously hurt, if not kill them. And they've never experienced that, so there's no fear for them there. But a logical consequence is we are not going to walk into the street or across the parking lot until you hold my hand. If you don't hold my hand, then we're not going. So you wait, and that might mean that you don't get to go into a cool event, or you might not get into the store or do whatever. But that is the consequences. If you don't hold my hand, we don't go. You can give choices in that though too. You can hold my hand, or I can carry you. You can hold my hand, or you can hold sister's hand and she holds mine. However that looks, that's appropriate for your child's age is fine, but you have to have consequences that fit whatever the misbehavior is. Because if they don't fit, they're not learning. And that is what discipline is. It's learning, it's teaching our kids to be functional adults. Let's see. If you decide to give a consequence that involves your child, so something happens and your child purposely dumps milk out, and you say, okay, what can we do to clean this up? What can we do now that you've dumped out your milk? And they say, I'll help you clean it. But they're not cleaning it right, or they don't do a great job. Did they do their best? You have to respect that they were involved and they did their best. And if later you want to come through and wipe it up again so it's not sticky or it doesn't leave streaks, then that's fine. But if your child does it, let them do it. Plan time for loving. We are so busy, and I know that Corona is a little bit different, but normally, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, a work full-time mom, work part-time mom, whether you're a grandma who only sees their grandkids part of the time, whatever that looks like, we're all busy. And so we really do need to plan time to love and cherish our kids and our grandkids. And so what are some of the ways that you guys do that? When do you fit time to focus one-on-one with each child and to have that time for loving and to tell them how you feel about them and that you're proud of them and that they're amazing and magnificent? I mean, we try to squeeze it in throughout the day, but I think for most of us, it's at nighttime. Like, we read books together at night. I tell my kids how much I love them. I have a special, thing that I tell the kids at night that's special for each one of them. And we cuddle, and I still cuddle my 3-year-old to sleep because one day she won't want me to. And so that's how we plan time for loving. And for working parents, nighttime is usually the most effective time because you're home and you're with them. So plan those special things. Plan those, and it can be daddy-daughter dates, mommy-daughter dates, where you have some one-on-one time, and that could mean just going for a walk with your kids or taking them to the park. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. The best thing you can do for your kids is spend quality time with them. Let go is the next one, and this one's sometimes hard too. Let your kids be kids. Let go of stuff. You don't have to control everything. If your son wants to wear a striped shirt with plaid shorts and cowboy boots, no one's judging you, Mom. We all think it's adorable. Let them choose their own clothes. It's good for them. He might be a fashion designer when he's older. If your daughter really wants bangs, but you think they're ugly, let her have them. It's her hair. let go of the little things that aren't going to cause harm and aren't going to do terrible things to them. Because we do make a lot of choices for our kids. So when we have the chance to let them make those choices, let them. Because how else do they grow and learn? And yeah, maybe bangs look terrible on your kid and you let her have them. And then she says, oh, I don't like them, they're ugly. Well, now she's just learned. Guess what? Bangs have to grow out. And so when you give choices and you let your kids do things on their own and make these decisions, they grow as a person and they're going to have those choices and expectations in life, but they've already learned from them as a child. Increase your consistency is the next one. And I think this one is very hard for parents as well because life is inconsistent. My kids are getting much more screen time than they normally do because of this virus. Like, we can't go where we normally go and do the things we normally do. And so my kids have had, like, sometimes at the end of the day, there's 3 kids here and they're all sick of each other and I haven't gotten to do anything around the house. And so we all just need a break with a movie. And that's not normally what would happen on a Wednesday in my house. But that's what happens right now. And so when things get back to normal, because they will get back to normal for us. It doesn't feel like it right now, I'll be honest, but it will. So when things get back to normal, my kids aren't going to have as much screen time. And that's going to be very hard. And I already know that I'm going to deal with meltdowns and tantrums. But the more consistent you are, the less you have that. If your kids know what to expect. If they know to expect 1 Mickey Mouse Clubhouse per day, then it's unlikely that they'll throw a fit when you say no to a second one. But if they get 1 day, but 5 the next, and then 3 the next, they're probably always going to cry for more TV, right? Or if some days they can have a cookie before their meal, but other days they can't, then they're going to throw a fit because they want those things. But the more consistent we are, then the more kids know what to expect and the less tantrums you'll have. And be consistent out in public too. That's really hard. It's really hard, especially if you feel like you're being judged by other people, or if your kid's throwing a huge fit and you need to get this done, and so you don't want to leave. If your thing is that your child throws a fit and you leave the store, but you really only have to get 2 items, and so you don't really want to leave, but they're still throwing a fit, then they know that they can manipulate you into doing other things. And I'll be real honest, manipulation is something that all people do. It is a very natural, very developmentally appropriate thing for your kids to learn to manipulate you, and it's not always a bad thing, but you also have to be aware that it's happening. So the more you're consistent, whether it's in public, whether it's at home, the easier things will be for you. It's hard when other kids come over to your house to play, or when you go over to someone else's house to play, because rules are different at other places. Like in my house, I said before that my kids can eat in common areas, and I'm fine with that. Sometimes they'll grab a snack and go sit on the couch together and eat. Sometimes they'll have a little table in their playroom and eat. But at my best friend's house, there's none of that. So when my kids go over to her house, they have to sit at the table and eat, because that's their rules. And then when her daughter comes over to our house, she has some more freedom. So it's hard to be consistent when things aren't consistent. But you can say to another mom, like if my friend said to me, I only want my daughter eating at your table because that's the rule in our house. And guess what? Everyone's eating at the table because I'm going to respect my friend's wishes and how she's raising her child. And sometimes you feel uncomfortable having these conversations, but they are any parent that you're going to interact with and have a relationship with because of your kids, you should be able to say things like, hey, can we do this because this is the rule in our house? And you can tell your kids hey, this is the rule here, but at our house it goes back to this. The next one is notice positive behavior. I always give the example that if I worked really hard on dinner, my husband just eats it and then like leaves. I already don't like to cook. It doesn't make me want to do it more. But if he's like, oh my gosh, this is really great. You really worked hard on this meal and it tasted delicious. I think, maybe I'll get on Pinterest and do some more recipes, or maybe I'll try something new. Same with our kids. The more we notice their good behavior, the more they'll want to do it. Everyone responds well to positive feedback, positive attention, whatever you want to call it. Adults do, kids do, everyone does. So the more positive attention we give our kids, the more positive interactions we'll have with them. The next one that I want to go over is excuse the child with a timeout. So depending on how you use timeout, it can be discipline or it can be punishment. If you do not connect the timeout with whatever's going on. So if your kid's having a meltdown and you say, hey buddy, go to your room and relax for a little bit, and when you're calmed down, we'll talk. Totally appropriate. If your kid purposely like pours milk out and you say go to your room, and you go in there and they're like playing with a stuffed animal, and then you yell at them and say time's starting over again, or if you're holding your child in a timeout chair and they're kicking and thrashing, those are punishments. The goal of a timeout is to calm your child down and get them back to status quo, so then you can talk about whatever is happening. Timeout shouldn't be used as a punishment. You should not be making the situation worse with a timeout. So if your kid's freaking out and they're screaming and crying and kicking and you're holding them down, they're not de-escalating. And you both are escalating the problem. You're getting more worked up and more upset. And that doesn't help anyone. So timeout should never be against like staring at a wall. They should not be locked in a room. They should not be put into like a closet or anything else like that. Timeout should be a place where kids feel comfortable and a place where they can calm down. And if calming down for your child is coloring, is playing with their stuffed animals, is laying on the bed, is they need to vent some of their frustration so they go outside and scream, what that looks like is different for every kid, but allow them to do that. Again, we're not using timeout as a punishment, so we're not saying you have to sit here and be quiet and still. We're letting them decompress, and kids decompress in other ways, and then they're coming back and we're talking about the situation. Your child should not be in timeout for longer than however many minutes their age is. So if you have a 2-year-old, timeout should not be longer than 2 minutes. If you're a 5-year-old, it should not be longer than 5 minutes, unless they're still really having a hard time. And then instead of timeout, maybe you come in and rub their back, talk to them, like help them calm down. When timeout's over, it's over. We're not trying to rehash timeout over and over and over again. We're not restarting the time constantly. Give them a timeout and then move on from it. So there's a lot that I went over, and it's really hard to do some of these sometimes because it's hard to be consistent. It's hard to ignore misbehavior. It's hard when you're having a hard time and your kid's having a hard time for both of you to decompress and be better in that situation. But that's why Fun Van's here. So if you're having problems, like, feel free to ask what an appropriate consequence for something is, because it's not always easy to know. And I mean, as a mom, I've been like, I know what I should do, but I can't think of it, especially in the heat of the moment, especially when your kid's having a really hard time or they're doing something that you didn't expect out of them. Just this past, last week, my 5-year-old took candy, Easter candy. I leave candy out on the counter because my kids know that they have to ask, and it's never been a problem. and she came into the room and I asked her to do something, but her hand was clutched up. And I was like, what's in your hand? And she didn't want to tell me. It's because she snuck candy. And that was very hard for me because my oldest is very honest. She's type A, she's a rule follower, and it wasn't something that I expected her to do. So I was pretty upset, and I said, okay, wow. That hurt my feelings, it broke trust, and then I had to move the candy. So I had to structure the environment. I didn't want my kids getting into the candy, so the Easter candy got moved. But at the time I wanted to be like, don't lie to me, don't try to trick me. So it's hard when you're upset or you're angry to do the right thing as a parent, and it's hard when sometimes our kids egg us on or manipulate us in those times. But just remember, at the end of the day, your kids are just trying to figure out all of this, and you're just trying to figure out all of this. So give each other a hug, give each other some love, and remember that it will all work out in the end. So I hope you liked our discipline lesson. Again, if you have any questions, put them down below. And this is a little bit of a longer video because we had a lot to go over. Next week is our last step lesson, and then we'll have 2 raising narrators. Remember that this is a new week, so we have a new contest for our giveaway. I have more bubbles, I have more chalk, and the other educators have put stuff together too. So we'll be doing a live drawing later today for the first week, and then we'll do a live drawing at the end of this week or the start of next week. I don't know exactly when, to give away more stuff. So I hope you guys are having a good week, and I will see you next week.